Alright, in this section we're going to begin to prep images for the website, and it's pretty straightforward, but along with that I'm going to show you a few of the ways that I work to create a website. I always start in Photoshop. Doesn't mean that you have to, it's just that's where I start to visually figure out where everything's going to go on the web page. So what I will first start doing then is open a new document. And for a static website, I may choose 1,000 pixels across and maybe 1,000 pixels high, 72 DPI, and RGB color. Okay? Then I just say OK, and I already have one of these open, so I'm going to come over here. Now, in my layers palette, this is Photoshop, of course. In my layers palette, I have these things. You'll have just the background image to start with, but I did these so I can make this go a little bit faster. So I have a kind of layout in mind, and all I did was I dragged some guides out here onto my page so that I can start aligning things and getting things ready. But the first thing I want to do is make the background black. That's done by coming down here to the bottom. I can pick a solid color background. Oops, well, you can't see that, it's off the screen. So I'm clicking on this little ball right here, and then the very top one it says solid color. And from the solid color, you can see it makes a little color selector over here. I can drag this over to the left hand bottom and say OK. Alright, so far so good. Next I want to create a new layer, which is right here, this little icon at the bottom down here that looks like a page with a corner folded. Now that I have a new blank layer, the checkerboard just means there's transparency there. I'm going to use the rectangle, a marquee tool. So my tool palette's over here. We're only going to use two tools here, the move tool and the marquee tool. The rest of these tools, that's a different movie. And with snap on, which is up under view, with snap on I'm going to be able to drag a marquee from here to here. And then I'm just going to fill it. I'll pick a swatch. Let's use this green color here. I'm going to fill it by going to Edit and Fill and picking foreground color, which is that color right there that we just picked out of the swatches palette, and normal and 100%. There we go. That is a picture placeholder for me. Okay, it needs to be transparent around the sides, and I'll show you why in a minute. The next thing I want to do down here is I want to have three more picture windows down here with this kind of black space just between each one of them. So instead of trying to, figure out all the math and get that all just right, there's a couple of ways I can go about this and let Photoshop kind of help me out here. Okay? First I want to deselect the ants that are crawling here. This marquee, whatever's selected in Photoshop has these marching ants. Now, with the marquee tool still selected, I can just click outside of that and it will deselect. Or I can go up under selection and deselect up here, or say Command D to deselect. Alright? So basically what I'm going to do next is I am going to drag, let's see, how can we do this? I'll do it this way. There's so many ways to do it. I'm just going to drag and kind of guess, trying to guess what that would look like if it were the right width across there. Okay? And then I'm going to make a new layer, need a new layer. Don't put it on the same layer. And then I'm just going to fill it with the same foreground color. Okay? So fill, foreground color, and there it is. Now I'm going to deselect. I'm going to come over to my move tool. I'm going to go back on this layer. I'm going to drag this down to that page icon again to make a copy of it. So now I have two, and one more time, and now I have three layers of the same thing. I'm going to take the move tool and move one of those layers over here to this side so that it snaps to my guide on this side. Now I have the middle one, and I'll just drag it out here. They look like they're going to make too big of a gap between the sizes. So what I can do is I can throw those two away and make that one wider again. I mean, there's a lot of things that I can do to make this happen. But what I could do is this. I'm going to Command Z a couple of times, Option Command Z, which is just putting it back, stepping backwards, Option Command Z, and now they're all stacked on top of each other again. And then I'm going to change their size just by going to Free Transform. So Command T we'll use a lot. So if you can remember Command T for Free Transform, that'll get you the handles that you need to move this stuff around. Okay, so I'm just stretching that out a little bigger than it was before, maybe something like that. I'm going to hit Return to accept that. Then I'm going to drag these guys back out. Oh, wait, did I get them all? I did not. Alright, I only transformed one of them. So back up again. I want to select all three of those and Command T to make them bigger. And then hit Return. I don't want to just make one of them bigger. So now I'm just going to select one and drag it over here. Line it up with the right hand side. And then the other one here. Okay, now to make sure that's about right. To make sure that they are aligned this way, I'm going to do the Shift Select to select them all, that one all the way down here, and that's how you select more than one layer. Shift Select or Command Select if you want to select something that's not contiguous or attached. Okay, and then up at the top here, I have this ever-changing option toolbar that has all these different things. Whenever I'm doing something down here, I've chosen another tool. If I look up here, this will continually change to reflect whatever tool or job that I happen to be working on. So I'm going to look up here, and this will distribute horizontally to the center of each of those things if I have them all selected. And that's how I can make these exactly even on both sides. So far, I have all my picture placement windows ready to go. And I'm just going to move this one by dragging its layer above both all of those. In fact, I'm going to move this one also so they're in more of the left to right kind of order. So that's this one, the middle one, and that one. And then on top I have the big picture window. So how now do I get images in here? I'm going to go to my desktop. And in desktop, I have this folder with my images in it already. So I already have a separate folder that I'm doing the Evergreen Museum, which is an air, space, museum, and water park. Yes, and water park. And these are the pictures right out of my cell phone. That was the only camera I had, and you know they say the best camera is the one that you have with you. So I took these pictures with my cell phone, and they're not fantastic, but we can fix them up in Photoshop to make them fantastic. Anyway, those are the images. I have picked the logo off their website, or in this case, I would probably redesign. I mean, in a real scenario, I would really redesign this. And I have a space background, which just has some stars in it. I've also chosen a font, which I have in my folder. So everything I work on that has to do with this in Photoshop, I put in one folder just so I can have everything together. So in this case, I'm going to select these. Now if they're JPEGs and I double click on them, they are going to want to open in preview. But if I drag them on top of the dock where the Photoshop icon is, then it will force them to open in Photoshop. Of course you can, and you can't see that because the dock is way down there. So I'm going to do that. And the other way to open it is within Photoshop. You can always go inside of Photoshop and say File Open, and then navigate to those images and open them. Okay. So this is my top picture, and I am just going to drag it over here to the side, click on this background, and then I want to make sure when I drag this image into this background, I want to make sure that I'm on top of this layer, that layer is selected, because it's always going to put the picture on top of whatever layer you have selected or whatever you're dragging in there. Okay, so with this selected and this one here, I'm going to just drag this image from here onto here. Now this is a pretty big image, as you can see. So two things need to happen. I can dismiss this now. One thing is I want to create a clipping mask so that it only shows up in that window that I have created over here. And I can do that by coming out here into this blue area, right-clicking or control-clicking, and then say create clipping mask. And that's what it says, believe me. It's just going off the screen here. Create clipping mask. And what it does is it says this image can only be visible where there's opacity down here. Okay? And that's good. Alright, the other thing I want to do is I want to scale this, but before I scale anything, I'm going to make it a smart object. Smart objects can withstand a lot of punishment. I can scale it and rotate it and shrink it down to nothing and bring it back, and I won't lose any resolution. It doesn't throw away any image data. So while I'm working on my website, I want to do that so I'm not throwing away data that I might want later. I may scale this down and then decide that I want to blow it back up again and use a detail from it. And by making this a smart object, that will be possible. Also, I can do blur and all kinds of corrections to it, and they'll be non-destructive. They won't change the picture. I can always go back to the original and not have any problem. Okay, so how do I make this a smart object? Same way I made it a clipping. I'm going to go out here and either right-click or control-click out here, and then this says, if you could read it, convert to smart object, and I'm going to click on it here. Watch the icon when I do that. It changes to have this little weird thing down in the corner, and that's how I know it's a smart object. Okay, now to scale it, let me zoom up here. To scale this little smart object, I'm going to use the free transform again. So Command T or free transform. And when I do that, I can see the middle of the picture, but I can't get out to the anchor points out on the edge without scrolling a whole bunch to get out there. So here's what I would want to do instead. Up, well, it should be up here. Oh, I double clicked it. Okay, Command T, sorry. Up at the top here, I have the scale, my size right now. And between the width and the height, I have this little chain link. So I'm going to link those two, width and height. I'm going to select one of those, and I'm just going to type in 10 because I know that's a big image. And now it's more reasonable as far as the size. Also, when I click this link, it constrains my aspect ratio so that I don't distort the image itself. Okay? If you don't use this, you can also use the Shift key to constrain your aspect ratio. Okay? Anyway. So, in this case, I actually want this to be quite a bit bigger. I'm just going to use a section of it. So here I am, back to enlarging, and I want to go this bigger. I could have probably used it exactly where it was. Okay, so about here. That's what I'm looking for. And I double-clicked on here to accept it, or I can hit return and that will also accept it. Alright, so this picture is linked over this window right here, and it's scaled, it's a smart object, and all I have to do is do these last three images, and the same way I did this one. And when we come back, I'll take care of some of that, and then when we come back, we'll learn how to do a little color correction and how to export them for the web.